What's up, everybody? This is Ajax, and this is episode 7 of the Golden Age of Broscience podcast. I have a very special guest for me today, who's also the first lady to be on the podcast, but Kiera of Quantum Health Academy, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. You asked me to come on yesterday and I was so excited. And then you said about tomorrow. And so I quickly cleared my calendar to be here. So thank you. Also love the name of the podcast, by the way. What was it again?
Golden Age of Broscience.
Love it. Well, I'm a girl. So, I don't know if I fit into the category of bro science, but what I talk about is women's health predominantly in my practice under Kiera Wellness. And then I do have the Quantum Health Academy, which we can chat about a little bit, but I'm sure that lots of bro science guys have lots of beautiful girlfriends and wives. And so all of my knowledge perhaps can go towards their ears. Maybe it's an episode for the ladies. But yeah, so my name is Kiera Lee, and I'm the founder of the Quantum Health Academy, which is a course designed to teach other practitioners in the healthcare space about quantum and circadian biology and the impact it has on everything from our metabolism to the way that our neurotransmitters function. And what I'm super passionate about is the way that it actually completely controls the hormone cycle in women. And then that really just delves into, I guess, modernity and how quickly we've walked into this age of technology is really impacting our health, and perhaps has a lot to do with why we find ourselves in this, I guess, pandemic of chronic disease that we seem to have no answers for and only a lot of medications to treat, not too successfully, may I add. And so I think we have to stop asking ourselves, blaming it on genetics from family members that never suffered with any of the health concerns that we have today as women. My mother had plenty of children, never had any issues. And so why are the women of today having, so many fertility issues, hormone imbalance, estrogen dominance? I don't think we can blame it on genetics. And so I guess the perspective of quantum and circadian health really gives you some answers. Well, it gave me some answers. I was like, finally, I can stop asking, but why though? But why is that imbalance? Why does that neurotransmitter do that? Why does that hormone become depleted? And then when I started to understand health from this perspective, I could stop asking why. I was like, oh, of course, that's why. So that was an exciting moment. And so QHA really just shares that with the world in a structured learning curriculum for those who want access to structured learning. And then I actually have my coaching company as a women's health coach, Kiera Wellness, which I've been running for maybe 3.5 years now. And we've helped tons of women reverse infertility, correct estrogen dominance. And at the moment, we're really focusing on PCOS and endometriosis, which is just far too common now.
That is a great intro with a lot to you. I'm not going to attempt to recap all of it. I have a lot of questions for you. For context, actually, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, most people don't know this. So obviously I'm known online for working with men, right? Bro science, bro audience. When I was still an in-person trainer for the really majority of my career, my predominant clientele was women. So I didn't actually start working with guys really as my primary demographic until I was online. So it was a very big shift. And being online, it was a lot easier from a marketing perspective to work with men. With women, you have to directly market to women. And the language, linguistics, and all that use is different. And then along with that, I also today have a fertility company that I operate with my wife, which is focused on treating infertility naturally. And circadian health is one of our primary pillars that we implement and base our entire practice around. So with circadian health, let's start there. You mentioned how you were looking for answers, you had health struggles of some kind, and then you sort of eventually found that. What were you dealing with originally that led you down that path of discovery?
Yeah. You said everyone in the health space kind of has this big story or this really crazy story. That's why they got into this area. But yeah, it really was through my own experience that I came to understand just how impactful circadian biology was and how much of our physiology it actually controlled. And I guess my story was I was in nursing school and I was loving it. Yeah. And I grew up on a cattle farm in Southeast Queensland. So outside picking beans on the weekends, always in the sunshine, always riding horses, drinking rainwater, eating very local and seasonal produce. So doing all of the right things, right? But not actually having to think about it because that was just life for me and my family. And then I got a scholarship. Pardon?
And that's amazing. So it was very this like sort of unconscious, like you were aligned without knowing it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think much of rural Australia actually is, which is fantastic. But yeah, so I got a scholarship to go and do the rest of my degree in the city, which I didn't really think too much about. I just thought, great, I have a scholarship, let's move and head to the city, only to find 2 months later that I was like very, very unwell. And I became unwell very, very quickly. It actually shocked all the people that I worked with and all of my coaches and even my professors at university because I sought help and guidance from them as well. And yeah, so I guess my symptoms were probably my worst two symptoms were chronic fatigue and really extreme vertigo. And so if anyone knows me, like I'm a very happy-go-lucky girl, like I'm up at sunrise, I'm walking around, I'm running, I'm, having big dreams, all these types of things. And for my health to just deteriorate so quickly was such a shock. And no one really had any answers. I was still training in the gym, I was still eating relatively the same foods, and my health had deteriorated. And my vertigo was actually so bad that it was not uncommon for me just to wake up in the morning and just faint onto the ground because yeah, it was just so chronic. My grades started to slip in school because I'm not very life smart, but I'm very academically gifted. And so when my grades started to slip, that had such a big impact on my mental health. I went from being able to recall information like this to just struggling to remember what I just read. And I thought, what is going on? Asked my professors at university, told me to go vegan. That just made things 10 times worse, as you can imagine. And so, yeah, I was in this space where I was really unwell. I was there on university, disconnected from my family. Now I was drinking tap water. Back then, I didn't even know there was a difference between tap water and rainwater. I just thought water was water, and
Mm.
there was no difference between the two. And I was such a big fan of pharmaceuticals, of the hospital environment. I felt very proud of my scrubs and that I was going to be a nurse and um, the career path I had chosen. And my grandparents were really proud of me for doing well academically. And so I found myself in this position where the medical industry wasn't really giving me any answers. And I was just getting worse and worse as the weeks went by. And so I sought out on Instagram and I put up a post and I said, does anyone know a naturopath in or something along those lines in my city? And someone replied to me and said, Kiera, long story short, it's not you, it's your environment. And I thought, what is this person talking about? This doesn't make any sense. And I was researching it, thought this is just quackery, like this, it can't be my environment. And then I started really thinking about the things that had changed in my life. And I thought, wow, the Wi Fi router for the two floors above me and below me is literally in my closet that's right next to me when I sleep. And I never see natural sunlight because I'm either in the gym, running here, running there, or I'm at university. I also worked at the university, so I was pretty much indoors all the time. And I never saw natural sunlight. I was never grounding. And all these things just came so naturally to me growing up. And so I just started watching the sunrise and like you can't make this up. Within 3 days, I was actually waking up, no vertigo, and I actually had energy. Like I was like, oh, I'm actually excited for the day. I have energy. And it was just such a quick turnaround. For me, I was obviously so happy because my mental space was not good then, as well as my physical health. And so I started researching more with a different perspective of like, okay, maybe there is something to this because I've experienced it. Keep in mind that at this point, like I'm a big fan of big pharma and veganism and all of these things, just super embarrassing to admit. But I remember like one day walking into the hospital and looking up at the ward and looking into all the rooms that kind of come off of the main hallway. And I thought if all of this stuff is true, if grounding, if our body's actually electrical and EMFs make us sick and artificial light depletes melatonin, which is the body's master antioxidant, 20 times more effective than vitamin C, and women's hormones are controlled by light and estrogen dominance really does impact breast cancer and like all these topics, right, that you learn about when you come into the health space, then I can't do this. Like I can't spend my life in this hospital helping people, telling them that this is the best treatment that they can possibly access when it's not. And it's not informed consent, unfortunately, because we tell people that a hospital is a place that you go to heal and this is the best care you can receive. But if all this is true, and I really truly from my heart believe that it is because I see it, my clients see it, even the doctors of my clients see it and they can't believe it. it works, and it's really how the body functions. And I think after being in the hospitals and myself, I lost my grandfather from lung cancer a year after my dad passed away in 2016. And I wish I knew then what I know now, because we're holding our loved ones' hands and we're praying for a cure, thinking that this is the best place for them, but it really isn't. And so I left nursing school over COVID and opened up Curely Wellness, and now we're here now.
Wow. So that's amazing. How long, so you mentioned how your decline in health was very fast. It was like 2 months, like you weren't, yeah, you were chronic fatigue, these symptoms. How long did that persist for? Was it like 6 months, a year plus? How long were you dealing with it?
Yeah, so I was pretty healthy like my whole life, teenage, early 20s. It probably lasted, I would say, a good 3.5 to 4 months, of the chronic vertigo, and I would say it was chronic fatigue now, like diagnosing my past self. I mean, I also had different other symptoms, like really, painful menstrual cycles,
Mhm.
PCOS, all these types of things. But I would say that all of my symptoms, like 90% of my symptoms reversed within just a month and a half of making these changes to my water, my light, and actually just getting outside and grounding. Yeah.
Wow. So the person who messaged you about, it's your environment, what were like some of the first sources you dived into that said circadian health light matters at all? Like, are there any that stood out?
Yeah, so I remember reading this paper and it said, I mean, I was well versed on how to research because in university we're taught how to do that to obviously complete assignments. And it was like shift workers, and obviously I was going into shift work. Shift workers have a 40%, no, female shift workers, and it was a cohort studied, the people in the cohort, sorry, were nurses. They have a 40% increased chance of developing breast cancer. That really stood out to me, and I was looking at the cohort, I was looking at actually reading, like, the method and everything, and I was like, "This is a fantastic study. Why are we not talking about this?" So I think that that study was really fantastic, and then really just looking into the work of, like, Dr. Gerald Pollack and these other doctors that are spoken about in the space. But I
Mm.
guess before I knew about any of these people, before I found, like, the other people in the space, I was just reading papers, just different random articles that you can literally just find online. Like, even Harvard published a study, titled "Blue Light's Making You Sick" back in 2006. And so it wasn't sources that were not credible. We were taught to, PubMed is not credible. It was these really high-end, like Oxford, publishing these
Mhm.
articles all about blue light, and lighting environments and how it makes us unwell. So, I mean, there's just so many.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oftentimes when people encounter circadian biology, quantum biology, they sort of blend together. There's this, I think, sort of there's a false assumption that it's novel, like it's a new thing, like we just
Mhm.
found out about it, or maybe you find certain people and like, oh, this person is the one, the expert on. But if you go back in time, 10, 20, not even more than that, like 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, the role of circadian alignment in the body's overall like hormonal systems, that's been documented since I think probably like the 1940s. It's not new that way. It's only probably in the last, I'd say, like 10 years, it just has hit the public like consciousness, right? Like now we hear about it. But the science itself is decades old.
Yeah, exactly. And my friend, she's an herbalist. She opened up like her old textbooks and her old resources, and they're just talking about circadian biology even through mainstream education. It's just that no one actually puts their finger on it and says this is the most important thing that actually governs every other system or has a great impact on every other system as well. So I think that we are taught it. And even in like one of the textbooks that I have here, going back and rereading these to obviously do self-study, I'm like, "Oh, it says the mitochondria produces light and it produces heat and it produces all these things." But that wasn't the focus, and that wasn't how the textbook was presented to me. So going back, you can find this information. It's just not what's focused on, and now I think we see, the industry bringing it back into the main point of focus.
Gotcha. And so, with light being the main focus, you have the quantum, is it the Quantum Health Academy, right?
Mhm.
That's obviously it has like a curriculum, that you've created. Like not to give it all away, but like how do you structure that for somebody? Let's say they don't know anything about light other than it's important. Okay, but like what's that kind of look like going through like the I guess I'd say sort of like continuum of like, here's like sort of where you start and like how it impacts your health, then like, sunlight, like how do you introduce it to people?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I'm very philosophical, so I think that light's a massive problem, but I think that community is a massive problem. I think social media is a massive problem. I think disconnection from our parents and our grandparents, all these things are a massive problem. And modernity and this nonstop economic growth culture we find ourselves in is a massive problem. And so I guess the first module for QHA really is just quite philosophical. And I don't actually teach in QHA, by the way. I am by no means qualified to do that. We have great faculty of a few nutritionists and doctors doing that for us and doing a fantastic job. But we really just wanted to set the scene for people, like, what actually has changed in the last 20 years? We find ourselves in this environment, and we get told that this is the best it's ever been, but why we're the sickest and the most unhappy that we've ever been. We're told that this is as good as it gets, but is that true? And I think and what was one of the lines in the module that was just so beautiful is, like, if you can trick people into thinking that their environment is the best that it's ever been, then they become, like, very controllable in that sense. And so we just wanted to really paint this picture of the bigger issues at play through, like, a very beautiful, like, loving, philosophical, kind of like a storytelling telling sense. And then I guess from there we kinda jump into more of the science background, and by no means, I created this course because I was so sick of hearing all these big ideas, but there was lacking of evidence. And,
Hmm.
sometimes you ask someone why and they can't tell you. And things are just really confusing, as they are in every space when new information comes out and science is trying to catch up and verify. And, there's a whole issue with that in itself. But so by no means am I saying that QHA is a thought leader. We're just really presenting the current information that's out there in a way that will be accepted by mainstream education, because for me, I'm not too focused on being like the thought leader or really well known in the space. I just want to present this information in a way that's going to help those children, or like my grandfather lying in those hospital beds, which means getting this information, packaged it up in a way that's neat and tidy and presenting it to the doctors in a way that they are taught to understand. And for me, like, that's what we've done with QHA. So it's really just going through all the research, pinpointing different things like UV light, infrared light, and how that actually impacts the biology, because healthcare professionals, like, they're very busy. They don't have time to nerd out like I just did for the last 4 years and understand all this. So if I can give them just 40% of the information on a platter and say, "Hey, this really matters," then I think we're doing, like, a good service.
You make so in the first module, you start off with like a philosophical premise. That's very interesting since when we talk about getting people healthy, and this is something I grapple with a lot, like you're not dealing with information per se. Like there's this, I think oftentimes, again, like a mistaken idea that if you just give people like perfect information, like they'll change. Like information, it's very magical. But people don't think in terms of information, they think in terms of stories. Like we have narratives, we have beliefs, and it's all these things are wrapped up with each other. And then when those things get challenged, or we're trying to find out like a new info sources, we're really trying to change our story. So then you have people who are alive today where they're unhealthy because of the modern environment. You can't just give them like a listicle and say like, oh well, I fixed you. It's going to contradict all these things. It's going to cause cognitive dissonance. So you have to sort of, I assume as you do in your course, or, the school, you sort of lay it out in this gentle manner of like, here's the story of the world that we live in, and here's how we've been sort of led astray, and like why we're sick. So you allow people to question things and develop curiosity, and then you can get into more, like you said, the science of it, the specifics.
Yeah, exactly. I love what you just said. We do think in stories, and it's just been that's a story since the dawn of time, that we do think in stories. We can see this in artifacts, and even, I'm in Australia, it's like the Aboriginal artifacts and paintings, like they definitely communicated through storytelling. And we've lost that art, and that has been replaced with science, which is controllable and viable. And I think the story component is so big, especially with young women. I mean, I can attest to this myself. When I figured out what actually creates good health, like being outside, not having so much stress, having time freedom, it kind of struck a chord with like a lot of my values. So even leaving university was really hard for me. because I was taught that success was going to university, and it was having the white picket fence, and it was like having all these material assets and having a good stock portfolio and all of these things. And that's safe. And that's how we're taught to function in the system. But the system is broken. And if you try to follow the system that everyone's following, then you will get the diseases that everyone else seems to have, because they all have the same lifestyles. And so when you tell people, like, hey, you need to get outside in the morning, you're asking them to prioritize themselves over perhaps like work or finances or social media or their image. And a lot of these things come up. And so I think the story component is really big in kind of shifting those, the value piece, getting people connected, feeling like they're part of a movement, part of something. Otherwise, making the changes that's needed to be made and putting the effort, realigning it to where it needs to go is extremely difficult. I hope that makes sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. I mean, especially with women, I think, yeah, you be more of a, you be the authority on this, not myself. But I've always found when I did work with women, more so than men, men you can be very blunt with. Like there's not a need to. It's still psychological, but the emotional impact and how you coach men, it's can be this very very direct. And it can contrast with women. You have to be not just gentler in the way of being softer, but every woman has a story about herself, which like you can take that apart and it can go very deep, right? Going back to childhood. And the story of her life that she lives with, that can lead her to a place of like disease, of weakness, of just, being obviously very unhappy. And all these things tie together. And it's not so easy to just like forcefully push through that and extricate it and say like, well, here's the new version of you. This doesn't work that way with the feminine at all. With yourself, obviously like women are, obviously your specialty. How do you approach that? Like you obviously have young women, you have ladies, they're unhealthy. There's probably a lot to work through. What's your process look like?
Great question. My process is ever evolving and it's definitely very individualized, which, you see programs and people streamlining things, but unfortunately, I just can't do that because every girl is so individual and really requires that like one-on-one support. Not always. Sometimes people can go into a group program or different things, but so my support is very like one-on-one. It's tailored. It's really spending the time to get to know somebody, and I'm helping past versions of myself. So for me, it's also about showing women what is possible through myself, how I show up every day, my level of health, what I look like, the way that I present myself, what my success and what I've kind of turned my life where I was, only 3.5 years ago, crying, leaving nursing school, thinking I'm going to be homeless when I grow up because I'm not going to university anymore, to now sitting here and being so much happier than I ever thought possible. And it all started with good health. That level of health allowed me to think more, to think better, because if you're struggling with migraines and you're struggling just to get through every single day and find the energy to do that, why on earth would your body think, oh, let's put energy into dreaming big dreams or to thinking about what is possible, or even just questioning my reality or where I find myself? Your body thinks that's not safe. We're not going to do that at all. We're not going to make any of these changes. We want to be safe, which means we want to be in community, which means we need to be the status quo. We need to be following what everyone else is doing because that's a safe path. So for me, it's about creating that community with other women, which is why we have like our group platform where all the women can interact, leading by example for myself, and then really just setting aside the time to actually interact with my clients, make sure I hear their story. Sometimes you need to put away the checklist, put away the notepad, and just listen. And often people can fix their issues themselves or they know what they need to do, but just providing that safe space for them to do that is just enough. And then they're well on their way.
Hmm. You mentioned at the beginning, I guess back in the conversation about getting people healthy. And I always ask all my guests this: how do you define health? Like that in itself is a philosophical question. There's to give context. One of my favorite, I'd say, sort of ghost mentors, who's had a major impact on my thinking. His name is John Smuts. He was the prime minister of the South African Union in the early 1900s. He was an Afrikaner. He wrote a book called Holism and Evolution, and it was a very great book. I would encourage everyone to read it. But he describes how science even back then had become very compartmentalized, and how when you're trying to describe like the phenomenon of life, living organism, you have to look at these different areas you have to account for. It's not just materialism. It's not just matter and chemicals, but you have matter, you have like the mind, sort of psychological environment, you have spirit, and then you have like space and time as well. And all these things interact with each other and they form holism, which what now is called being holistic. Like he's the progenitor of that term. And then, taking that into account, like I've come to view health as, in the simplest terms, is that the body is a living system of energy, like we're a complex system of energy. And then with that energy, that energy is attuned to its environment. And when it gets disrupted or you have too much of it or not enough something, it becomes dysfunctional. And then that's a very overly simplistic definition. But I think when you're defining healthy and you look at all these endless conditions of diseases, especially Western diseases, where we're dysregulated and we're either overweight, inflamed, we have a lack of nutrition, we have a lack of light. I think it works. So that's a lot of prefacing. But, for yourself, how do you define health? Like, how do you think about it?
Yeah. I think health is the absence of disease. So no symptoms, you feel good. Health is something that you shouldn't have to think about. It's something that just is. And that's what I guess, life was like. Everyone was healthy. They were aligned. I think I think a word you can swap out health for is coherent. So if you're coherent, you're going to be healthy. And coherence comes from many places. I mean, of course, we can look at like microbiomes and we can look at hormone panels and we can look at all these things. But for example, if your nerve system isn't regulated, you're not in coherence, right? Your thoughts are not where your present is. You're not in your body. We can look at coherence through light cycles. Are you incoherent with nature, with nature's timing? Like you just said, are you coherent with your environment? Are your cells actually feeling the same environment as what you're visually seeing, right? Because my cells right now are not, and they're seeing this, they're feeling, I can't see it, but they're feeling the radiation from my laptop. So they're sensing something over here. Mitochondria in my head are going to be getting a different signal from this beautiful road mic that I have. And so right now my body's not in coherence with my environment. And I think when you have more incoherence than coherence, that's when we can get some pretty nasty illnesses popping up. But yeah, so for me, health comes with coherence and it shows through people, through their eye color, through their vibrance, through the way that they show up in life.
That is very insightful. What a great term. So from that, like, how does light factor into that? And like the light
Yeah.
environment be exposed to?
Yeah. So when I started learning about light, I was like, wait, there's light that I can see and there's light that I can't see. And like, what even is this going on here? But there's light that you can see. I know that you've had Zaid on, so just tell me to stop if he's already covered this. It's also light that you can't see. We tend to think as a light that we can't see as something that doesn't really exist. So, for example, the way that my phone connects via Bluetooth to my UE boom, like that's happening through a light frequency and they can talk to each other because they're both on the same frequency. It's kind of like when you think of your mom and then she calls you. You're on this similar frequency and you're in coherence, right? If your UE boom's not connecting, like you're not close enough, you're not in coherence. So we have this light that we can't see, and turns out it governs a lot more than what we think we can. We seem to think that just because we can't see something, that it doesn't exist. Like, how can I put this in a way that's really easy to understand? So I can't see wind, but I know that it's windy because I can look outside my window and I see that the tree is swaying, and I know that it's the wind that's moving that, right? So I can't see the wind, but it's having an impact on nature, on the tree. I can't see the wind, but I can feel it, and my body can have a biological response to it because I get little goosebumps at the back of my neck when a cold breeze blows by. And so, although I can't see the wind, I'm definitely having this physiological response to it. I can feel cold. I want to get away from it. I want to put on something warm. And that's the same way that EMFs and radiation and this light that we can't see impacts our biology. Our biology is responding to it, but our eyes just can't really pick that up. So it exists. Our cells, they all respond to different frequencies, different levels, different amounts of light, different light frequencies. And we're just beginning to discover that even what's like something I was researching recently that was so interesting, that the mitochondrion, like their cristae in their little colonies, they actually line up together. And I guess the vision behind that is that that actually allows quantum coherence. It allows those mitochondria to all do the same thing and be happy and healthy and in coherence, right? And that actually relies on the Schumann's resonance and proper electromagnetic fields that our biology has designed to function for hundreds of thousands of years. Or if you believe in God, then that's the frequency that God gave our biology. It's perfectly designed to suit us. Only now we're around all of these random fields that confuse our biology. And for my reference, like the cristae don't line up, and then we get incoherence. And so we get illness and a lack of entropy in that mitochondrial colony. And so that's just like one. I try to stay away from science as much as I can because I'm kind of sick of it myself. But that's just one example of how light influences our biology.
That was I mean, I know you say you're sick of science. That was an incredible breakdown. I don't think I've heard anyone define that phenomenon better. Could you talk about the Schumann resonance? Since let's assume the listener has no idea what that is.
So there's this natural frequency of the Earth. It's called the Schumann's resonance. I don't actually know why, but it is. And it's a very specific frequency. Can't actually recall it off the top of my head. Do you know what it is? It's like,
I think I'm going to miss the decimal points. I think it's around like 7.8 hertz.
7.15 something, maybe 1.5. I don't, or 7.8. I don't know, something like that. And like the theory is that life evolved to suit its environment. There's this beautiful connection between us and our environment. And it's like this symbiotic relationship. So although we can see this separation with our skin, with the walls in our house, for a long time there was no separation, there was no walls. And so a perfect example of this is like plants. I was just learning this at university the other day, that plants actually can't survive without us because there's this beautiful movement of CO2 and O2 between the two of us, and we both rely on that. And that the plants renew it for us, and then we can breathe it in, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. The plants breathe that in and give us back O2. And it's like this beautiful relationship. And that's the way our biology functions as well. And so the Schumann resonance is the exact same. It's constantly feeding us this beautiful signal, and it's supposed to be a coherent signal. And it keeps us really healthy. It keeps all of our cells intact. That's a frequency that they love to have, right? They're really, really happy. It's like when you give a toddler a big bowl of ice cream, it's like so happy and so content in that moment. Exactly how our biology works, only when we stray away from that, which actually there's a lot of people talking about how with all of this Wi-Fi, and I mean, I sound like a tin hat old person that I used to see at like markets when I was 7 and thought they were crazy. Now I'm that person, unfortunately. It's really changing the Schumann's resonance essentially for us. And so our biology is trying to find like its instruction manual, right? Like when you buy a flat pack from IKEA and you're like, I'm going to try and put this together myself. And then you do something wrong. You're like, oh, I should have used the instructions. Give me the instructions. I'm going to try again. Our biology is always looking for instructions to keep us together. And we used to think that happened biochemically. Now we know it's far more complex than that, and it does rely on light and magnetism and all these different things. And Schumann resonance is one of them. It's like the instruction manual, it's the glue for our biology. Now, when we actually can't access our instruction manual, whether that be the Schumann's resonance or that be like light dark cycles or whatever it is, our biology starts to break down. And so it's doing the best it can to think about all of the things that it's done in the past and keep us working well. But when we have this breakdown, we start to see disease. And we're not able to put the flat back together properly, and it doesn't look too pretty, and perhaps our wife's pretty angry at us for doing that.
Have you read the book The Invisible Rainbow at all?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So for the listeners who are like wondering, what are you guys talking about? So the Schumann resonance is real. Like that's very scientifically documented a million times over. It's not, that's a real phenomenon. The Invisible Rainbow, it's by Arthur Furstenberg. And it documents the history of electricity and its effects on human health. And the hypothesis in the book is that the introduction of electricity, like at scale, from we're going back to like late 1800s, AC/DC currents, and then to radio, and then to what we would call, eventually getting like to through a 2G, like 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. The author attributes those changes in EMF to contributing to global health crises. The most recent example being, in fact, COVID-19. So this is very, I want to say, out there because it's a very interesting theory that I think is worth looking into. But if you're hearing this for the first time and going like, what the hell? EMFs do affect our health. And, the idea that if you, let's say, create a 4G network that is global, or you create 5G network that is global, or if you, let's say, locally, you set up an electrical environment where none existed before ever in history, that could have an effect on biology of the things that live in that area in ways that you can't predict. But it's a really good book. I'd recommend if anyone wants to sort of geek out and maybe freak out a little bit reading it. It's a great read.
Yeah, it is. And for anyone who wants really high level, if you don't read books and you just want to scroll on X and read some informational content, someone who I really trust who's an electrical engineer is Tristan Scott. I think his handle is Bitcoin and Beef. He posts fantastic content around this topic. But I read a paper recently and it was showing, and it had images. I like pictures. Very easy to understand. They actually expose rats to different frequencies, whether that be Wi-Fi routers, or the new one is the induction stovetop benches, that heat up really quickly. Full of EMF. For anyone listening, if you're a pregnant woman or you're looking to conceive or you're in PTT, you need to really stay away from those induction stovetops. They're literally aligned with your reproductive system and they're so horrible for your health. But so they expose, side note, they expose these rats to these frequencies, and they found that, this is important for men because they care about this topic right now. The mice started balding and had similar patterns male pattern balding, and their hair grayed as well. And so, that's an example of things that we can't see actually impacting the things that we can see quite literally.
That's a really good example. That's interesting. My wife hates electric stovetops. We have gas stoves now, but I've never liked them just from a practical standpoint. Yeah, the role of EMFs, I believe it, but then at the same time, modern life, right? It's almost impossible to function without them, since unless you completely detach yourself from really all of civilization. So then you end up in this position of okay, how do I modulate these things? So hopefully not have them affect me that much. We recently, myself and my family, we moved to, we have a couple of acres. We live in Texas, and there's electrical poles around us, which, they're there, obviously. But I think it has made a difference circadian health-wise, since we get very uninhibited sunlight, morning light, or light environments very improved even from living in a suburb. We so much open land, and then also being able to ground as well. We can go outside barefoot, and we have that available to us. So I'd like to think overall we're mitigating the damage. Of course, you can't account for all of it, but hopefully you can count for a lot of it. With light environment, going back to that, what's sort of the first thing you tell people when they're trying to get aligned again? Is it just go outside in the morning? Is it a sequence? Where does it start?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and it's a good point that you made. Modern technology, you can't really get rid of it. It's the way I like to look at it is it saves you time. For example, I can send an email and have a response in 2 minutes rather than sending my pigeon with a letter across the globe, right? Which will take months and months. So it's saving us time. But maybe the flip switch on that is that it's actually costing us time and years of our life. And so you really have to look at it as this algorithm, I guess, and find out what's worth it and what's not. But there's low-hanging fruit, swap your AirPods for wide earphones. And really, to answer the question that you just asked, is it depends where the client is and where the person is. So I like to look at it as a signal. So obviously, if our phone has bad signal and it has 1 bar compared to 3, then it's going to start glitching. It's going to be slower. It's not functioning optimally. It's not in as coherence as it could be. And our biology is the exact same way. So if you're someone who has been living indoors all the time, you're being heated all the time, you're not really out in natural sunlight, and you live in Sweden, then what the signal that you need needs to be very strong to outweigh that, because your solar signal is so weak in your environment. Your light cycles don't differentiate that much. It's not night and day. It's kind of gloomy and night and gloomy. So when you start to repair, you really need a strong signal. So the weaker your natural signals are, you live in a city, lots more EMF, further away from Schumann's resonance, you can't ground as much. Even if you are grounding, there's probably wires in the ground. You're not getting as much UV light as someone in, say, let's Australia. What you need to do to heal is far more dramatic than someone like myself, who's in Queensland, where I have really different light cycles, very strong UV. I have very dark nights. I live in the country. So, for example, 5 minutes of grounding for me is probably comparable to like an hour of grounding for you in the city, like very loose terminology there.
Mm.
Uh, and so for everyone, it's basically the same. Like, just like it's not hard. Like, get outside, watch the sunrise, get outside at UVA rise. There seems to be those very predominant light frequencies that have very big impacts on our biology. Now, I think that all of it, all the changes in light frequencies that happen from sunrise to sundown, all are going to impact our biology in such a dramatic way, but we just don't know how yet. So outside as much as possible, but if you can't do that, obviously we all have jobs or adults. It's like getting outside of those key frequencies. So sunrise, UVA rise, UVB, spending at least 30 minutes in the UV light every day. And if you're someone that's living in a not so great environment, you really need to be like maximizing your weekends, getting as much time outside as you can during those times, because you need more signal, you need more input to rewire your biology. Now, I don't want to tell people that if you live in Sweden, you have to go move. And this is just my personal opinion. I very much believe that everyone can have their own opinions, but I've been to Central America and I actually met a young man on the beach. And I knew he was a circadian person because he was standing in the water watching the sunrise in a kaniki. Um, and we became very good friends. And he had been in Central America for a long time and he wasn't healing. And what he had to do to get there was, he's from Canada, by the way. So he thought, my environment sucks here. My signal is lost. I need to move somewhere where it's very sunny, volcanic sand, all these things. But he wasn't healing. And
Mm.
so I just want to say, for anyone who's listening, we can be very dogmatic that light is the most important thing. And it's so important. But your nervous system is also important. Your financial position is also important. This young man didn't have much finances at all. He was only like 20 years old, and he spent all of his money, left his family to go to this place that was going to heal him, only to find out that his nervous system was so dysregulated. He felt so unsure of himself that he just couldn't heal. You cannot heal if your nervous system's not working. And so what people are capable of doing and the changes that they're capable of making in their lives determines on their personal position, their financial position, their mental health, their work schedule, all these things. Because yes, you can have all the sunlight in the world, but if you're now struggling financially because you sold your house and you moved your family to the countryside and now your wife hates you, like that's going to be very stressful. So just bringing some realistic viewpoints back into this, because I've seen it firsthand. And I'm a very big advocate for like that. That makes sense.
No, that makes great sense. That's a very overlooked point. That's very wise. Yeah, it's very easy to like give like broad brushstroke solutions. Like just do this, just do that, and
Mhm.
it'll fix things. I'm like, I mean, I'm married. I have kids. I've seen. I have a couple friends. I have a couple friends that have gotten divorced. You can do everything, quote unquote, right with your health. You can exercise. You can eat correctly. You can go for a morning run. You also could struggle financially. You also could not get along with the person that you attach yourself to. And that will affect your health far more than the morning sun will. Like
Mhm.
in a way, like you have a universe inside you, and that universe is more powerful at times than the external universe. Uh,
Mhm.
we are always, I don't want to say at the mercy, but we are always experiencing our thoughts and our feelings and, our relationships, all of that. And you can't discount that at all. Nor can you think that just by doing one thing, on the outside, that it will, change your world that way. So no,
Mhm.
that's a really good point. So, with you talked about, everyone always talks about morning light, sunrise. What actually makes that unique? Like, why is the beginning of the day like the most critical?
Mhm. Yeah. So we say it's like your saving grace, your second chance every day, rewires your circadian biology. It's very hydrating for us. So when the sun's at that angle, all of these, I guess, quote unquote, like bad frequencies of light, like UVA, predominantly UVB, like they actually can't make it to the earth. And so what they do, it's very minuscule. So it's this, all the longer wavelengths can make it. So we have like these infrareds, which interact with our biology in a very specific way. It's very hydrating for us as well. So we're going to produce a lot of intracellular water. We think hydration is all about the water we drink, but if your cells aren't making it, then that's another issue. Mind you, we only actually produce like 400 or 500 milliliters of intracellular water a day. So people like bang on about how important that is, and it is, but it's like you still need to like drink water as well. Sorry, a bit of a nerd joke there. But yeah, so it's like really resetting your circadian rhythm. It's letting your body say, okay, so in like 8 hours or whatever hours, we're going to get ready to go to bed and we're going to produce melatonin and we're going to do all these things. I actually think that UVA rise is probably just as important as the sunrise, but you need them both together. So I kind of look at it as when you're painting your deck outside, is that what you call them in America? Like a deck?
Yes. Yeah, you got it.
Veranda? Okay.
Wait, what do you call it in Australia?
Like a veranda?
A veranda? Okay, no, wait, that's sometimes in the South it's referred to as a veranda sometimes. So, okay. Yeah, same thing.
When you're painting, when you're painting your veranda or your deck, wherever you are in the world, you will prime that, right? Or else your paint's not going to stick. You might put on all this great paint or whatever you're doing to your walls, but if you don't put a primer on, you don't wash it, and you don't get rid of all the dirt, then there's no point in putting that paint on because it's just going to look crap and it's all going to peel up. And that's the way that I see light, is like you need to prime your body with this infrared light that comes first in the morning. Then you apply the UVA light. Then you apply the UVB light, and each light frequency is prepping you for the next. Like, for example, we can see that people get a lot more sunburn if they're not being primed with infrared light or UVA light before getting UVB light. Now, we actually can get tan in UVA light, which is essentially priming us for the stronger wavelength of UVB. Our hormonal cascades happen as well. So we will have different biological responses hormonally to like infrared or UVA. And so we need them in the right order. It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to shine UVA and then infrared and then sunrise and sunset and then UVA again. It needs to be in this beautiful cascade and this beautiful painting and these beautiful layers to have the right effect in our body. And that's why it's so important. Dr. Gerald Pollack, I think in one of his experiments, I spoke to him on my podcast, he said that there was a very big difference. This is a different topic, but for anyone listening, water can be structured by light, and the water inside of us gets structured by light as well. And it can do different things inside of us when it is structured versus non-structured, right? And one of those things that really structures that water is infrared light. But Gerald Pollack found that if you kind of swap it around and you don't expose kind of said that wrong. Like UV light can also structure water, but it doesn't really happen if you don't have that prime of the infrared as well. So we see this coherent actual change. So the absorption peak of our water our water in our body, when we wake up and we go outside, is that of the infrared range. And then as time goes on and it's actually absorbed that infrared light, the peak absorption of our water actually changes to UV. So now it's like, okay, I've got on my infrared, I'm ready to absorb UV light. And I just think it's so interesting and so beautiful the way this happens. But if you don't get the infrared and you just get the UV, it doesn't work like that. So you really need to allow your body to actually get primed. And there are two great examples as to why.
So you described that really well, really, really well. I had talked about this with Zaid, like in a very different style conversation, but with the rise of skin cancer, like that's a very common topic now. And then you look at the correlation between sunscreen usage and skin cancer. So sunscreen gets introduced, I think, 1950s, right around there. Or it might have been like late 1950s, 60s, but sunscreen gets introduced to the public. People start using it, and then skin cancer rates just go up in a big, nice sloped line, and they keep going. And then now we all get told today, like, you don't want to be exposed to the sun because it can burn you, and that will cause skin cancer. But he made the point, and you could really expand on it in a way that gave it a lot more depth, that the reason that light exposure can potentially be harmful is that, number one, we're not following that cascade, that sequence. We're not going outside in the morning, the midday. People just go outside immediately. And then also our habits have changed around light exposure. Very often for people, a lot of the world, maybe not so much in Australia, or, Texas is kind of sunny a lot, but in a lot of the world, people won't go outside at all until summer. So like they're indoors. summer comes and everybody wants to be tan. And the way they go out tanning is they go out during the peak of the day when it's sort of the sun is at, right directly overhead at its strongest. They put sunscreen on so they can stay outside longer, and then they burn. So they got this sort of like very incomplete array of sunlight, or incomplete sequencing of sunlight, and then sort of overpowered sunlight, and then overexposure of sunlight. And they get they burn a bunch, maybe they get tan, and then if they do get melanoma later on, they say, well, the sun caused it. It's like the sun didn't cause it. Your timing and exposure of sun caused that problem.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting topic. I've definitely heard that viewpoint before. I can't comment on it too much myself,
Mm.
but anything that I say as well, like, is not medical advice. Like, this is just educational purposes only, just thought provoking.
Mm-hmm.
I I think that one of the biggest issues is exactly what you said. You spend all day inside, your body essentially thinks that it's winter because you have the air conditioner on and it's 20 degrees all day, and you never get outside. And if you do, you're wearing your sunglasses, so you're not going to get tan. And your body doesn't even know that it's winter. It just thinks that it's summer because it's receiving the input signals of like cold, no UV light, indoors, hibernation. Um, it's winter, and so your body wouldn't naturally prepare itself to handle the high UV light, because why would it do that? It's just a waste of energy and it's incoherent. So summer rolls around, you should naturally be outside sensing through your eyes and your skin that slow climb in UV. And then your body is going to produce this melanin, which will allow us to handle light in a safe way, reflect it, refract it, do its job, and then disappear for the winter. Right? But now we're inside, our body doesn't get that little build-up signal. So now it's the middle of summer and your wife says, "Oh, let's go outside. Let's take the kids to the beach." And you get completely burnt because your body says, "Oh, I had no idea that it was the middle of summer. I haven't done my prep work. Like, what's happening here?" And so it's like this confusion and this incoherence. Again, like, we also, people with melanomas, if you look at their blood work, like, they're far healthier than people who don't. I interviewed someone, you should interview her actually, she's fantastic, my favorite interview ever, Dr. Prue Hart. She's a photoimmunologist from Western Australia.
Mm.
Fantastic. She was part of that paper that just got released, actually by a guy in Texas. He funded that says sunlight does not, like, cause illness. Sunlight is the cure for all disease. She's great. But she says that it's not just about the light, it's also about, the darkness component, and that
Mm-hmm.
the other component is that, like, I'm Irish, my family's Irish, we're not designed to be in the sun all the time. For example, like, German Shepherds, like, they don't do well in Queensland heat, like, they will molt, lose their hair, they'll get really sick because their coats are not designed to be here, they're designed to be where it's cold. And I
Yeah.
think that we're the exact same, we can learn a lot from nature. Um, I think that sunscreens are very carcinogenic with the chemicals that are put in them. Also, around that time, there wasn't just the implementation of sunscreen, it was also this fear-mongering campaign against UV light. So people started applying sunscreen, but they were also spending less time outdoors in general, completely wearing sunglasses, all these things, which is a big marketing campaign to sell sunglasses as well. But the darkness component is really important because darkness is when we repair everything that's been damaged. And so if you don't have adequate melatonin levels and you're not sleeping properly, if you're eating high carb at nighttime, if you're chronically stressed, if your blood glucose is elevated, if you have certain hormonal imbalances, you're not going to repair when you're sleeping. And so all these damaged cells are just going to keep floating around. Now, I'm not just talking about skin cancer here, I'm talking about cancer in general. And it just increases and skyrockets your chance of developing all cancers, really, because we're not taking out these damaged cells like we're literally designed to do via apoptosis and autophagy every single day. So I think that I always tell people, like, get outside, yes, really important. But if you're going to do that, like, make sure you're sleeping properly as well, because you want to be able to repair any damaged cells or any DNA mutations. I mean, that's exactly what makes you tan, is the DNA being damaged. But you want to repair that cascade at nighttime. So yes, get outside, but to be safe, you need to make sure you are sleeping properly and you are blocking artificial light at nighttime as well.
The darkness component that doesn't get mentioned too much. Like, I've been asked this question for years. You see this float around online everywhere. Like, how do I get better sleep? How do I get better sleep? And then everyone, I think, sort of kind of knows the answer, at least in regards to like the devices. Like, well, you're on your phone right now at midnight asking this question. That's probably like part of the issue. But the lack of darkness in our environment today, like it's like I live in the country, like it's dark outside. There's no lights anywhere. Like it gets dark here and we all sleep better. But for a lot of people, especially who live in the city, you've never actually been in true dark. Like you have light coming in from somewhere, just whether it's outside street light or night lights or your router's in your room or your laptop's still charging. Like if there's some source of light that's still signaling your body to be alert.
Yeah, exactly. There's studies that are done that shows that our hypothalamus and our eyes, they respond to single photons of light, like singular photons of light, which is insane, right? Our bodies, and that should tell you that light's pretty darn important because our body is like, even just one photon, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to make a decision based on this photon of light. Um, and so it is hard, like when you live in a city to get rid of that. But I guess progress is like better sometimes than trying to aim for perfection, especially if like you can't be perfect and you are in a city. If you're someone that is, on your phone at 9 o'clock at night and you don't have a red filter on or you don't have blue-looking glasses on, then simply just adding those in is going to increase your sleep quality dramatically. So I would say don't try to be perfect. Just think of progress. But like that's like the lowest hanging fruit because most people can do some crazy things to make their room pretty dark. Like when I was growing up, I remember waking up and I didn't know where I was because it was so dark. I would have to like touch my bed and be like, okay, why am I upside down? Like, where's my walls? Where's the bathroom? And now it's not like that. Like, I can't remember the last time I just moved house, so I haven't set my room up yet. And it was like completely dark. But you can like paint your windows with like this is how important it is, especially if you live in a city. Like the darkness is something you can actually do. You can at least paint that like comes off with water, like water-based paint, and you can like literally paint your windows. You can put glue tack over like little lights in your room in your office to make sure that it is really dark. Um, but it's so important receiving that signal, allowing your body to repair. Yeah, there's no substitute for it really. And when you understand that melatonin is actually the most powerful antioxidant, I'm studying naturopathy. And just through Twitter, X health space and Instagram health space, you hear about people banging on about like vitamin C, vitamin C. But for anyone who knows who's listening, ROS, reactive oxygen species, vitamin C can control or handle 3 reactive oxygen species per molecule. But, and this is from, what's his name? The gentleman who wrote the paper. I can't remember his name. I'll have to tell you later because I need to credit him. He does such a fantastic job. Wrote a paper that showed that melatonin, one molecule of melatonin can handle 10 reactive oxygen species.
Oh,
And that's even, yeah, I know, right? And we produce that for free every time that we're asleep and also systemically all the time. But that's not including the fact that melatonin also promotes antioxidant enzymes like glutathione, which can handle a whole bunch more. So it's just so much more powerful. And so really, if you're relying on vitamin C to get you through the day and handle your inflammation, I think that you just need to make your room darker at nighttime and you're going to have such a compounded effect. And melatonin actually can also make it like inside the cell and outside the cell, whereas I believe vitamin C is only, is it water or fat soluble? It's only water.
water.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's only
water.
water solid. Whereas melatonin can go all over the place and put out fires everywhere all through your body and delete all the inflammation. So that's why darkness is really important. Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. Wait, talk about melatonin more. Like, so where do I even start with this? There is a very fringe, like even the bodybuilding world, fringe bodybuilding practice of guys that will occasionally take very high doses of melatonin, like 40, 50, 60 milligrams for,
Crazy.
okay. And I've done this, and this is not medical advice. I'm not telling you to do this. Like, don't
Not
like,
medical advice. No medical
yeah,
advice.
yeah. None of this medical advice. This was purely experimental, a bit of taking like very high doses of melatonin for fat loss at night. Because like it will knock you out. And you do oxidize life while you're sleeping, you breathe out carbon dioxide. And I've done it and with like no ill effects for like a week where I just wanted to see like, let me see what will happen. And actually I woke up fine. Like nothing bad happened. But at the same time, my intuition says, I don't think this is healthy to take 50 milligrams of melatonin at night, like, for long term. But yeah, how do you view like melatonin supplementation in general? Since this gets argument a lot, people say this is terrible. Some people, it helps them and they find it helpful. The dosages will be all over the place. They'll be like as little as like, maybe 250 micrograms. Then you'll have people say, I take 5-10 milligrams. It does nothing. Like, how do you just like walk us through that?
Yeah. Well, not medical advice. Did you say that it was to promote fat burning in like the bodybuilding world?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's interesting because melatonin is such an antioxidant. The lower your inflammation, and this is why girls will really struggle to lose weight. Um, the lower your inflammation, obviously taking high dose of melatonin is going to be great for gut inflammation, systemic inflammation at that dose, which can actually be detrimental because you do want ROS in some places. But yeah, so the lower your inflammation, the more leptin sensitivity you're going to have. So the more fat burning you're going to be into. So that makes complete sense to me.
Hmm.
Is it the safest way to do that? I don't know. But
Probably not.
probably not. Pretty funny. But yeah, so I've supplemented with melatonin recently. I think it's great for dialing in the circadian rhythm when you're traveling.
Hmm.
I think it's great to take like an hour before bed. I was taking 5 milligrams and I slept really well. And I've traveled a lot the last 3 years and probably the last 6 months. I haven't traveled the last 6 months, been a very stressful time for me. But before that, when I was traveling, so the previous 6 months, I was taking melatonin. Super helpful. I felt like I had higher energy, especially returning home. I was sleeping, getting into my circadian alignment like much quicker. My inflammation was lower. My face was like less puffy. Body was holding less fluid after flying. Um, I also think it's good for like restoring the gut brain axis as well.
Hmm.
I think it's really helpful, and I think it can be used as a very targeted approach with some GI issues because of the effects that it does have of inflammation in the GI system as well. But obviously, you don't want to be taking it at the wrong times, and you don't want to be taking it for a long time. It's just been banned in Australia actually because too many parents were drugging their kids with it to get
Huh.
them to sleep. So they just banned that last week, which is fantastic. Um, but it does make you sleepy, right? So
Hmm.
that's just going to do the opposite of supporting your circadian rhythm. Be useful to dial it in, and for very specific circumstances, but predominantly like you don't want to be taking it because it is going to interact with your hypothalamus and change the enzymes needed to produce all those sleep cascades that we need, which is not optimal. No.
Okay, so that's a very contextual usage. So, it can be used at times for periods of time, but not something obviously to use chronically and become dependent on that you need it to sleep. Yeah.
I would advise against it. Yeah, I think like you know that as well. Like I don't think you're taking melatonin every night. Probably don't recommend that to too many people.
No, I don't really recommend melatonin at all. Like I go back and forth on it. Like I don't recommend it at the same time. Like I've seen it in certain use cases. Let's say like last year I was traveling internationally and I was changing time zones like every few weeks, basically. Like other opposite of the world, went from North America to East Asia. Just your sleep is just wrecked. Like your body doesn't know where it is, right? And then like if you do that repeatedly, now you really don't know where it is, and like you don't feel right. And so I would use it like acutely, like all right, I'm gonna take like 40 milligrams, and it would give me like kind of a normal night of sleep. Like I actually slept 8 hours, and I was able to sleep, and my deep sleep is good. But I didn't use it outside of that, and I've recommended occasionally since then to, again, like time zone change clients, like people that do hop around that way of like, okay, try this for a week. And then when you finally like get back to where you actually hopefully live for longer than 1 or 2 weeks, like just get yourself outside, go outside in the morning, and then taper down, and then like don't keep taking it. But your commentary on its usage for like gut health, yeah, that had never. You know much more about it than I do. I sort of just look for the effects, but no, that's interesting.
I also think it's about the cost benefit ratio for people as well. Like if someone is like I've worked in the past with a lot of finance people, men in finance, that like live in New York City, and so if they're so stressed that they're not sleeping, like, I don't really care if they're taking melatonin every night. If they're actually sleeping, I think the cost, like the benefit is way better than the cost, right? In that situation. And you can see that in their blood work and you see that in their physical health and their mental health improving. Obviously, it's not a long-term solution, but it is beneficial in that way because like anxiety is going to cause you not to sleep, but a lack of sleep is going to cause you anxiety.
Mm.
So you really just have to like pick your battles there. And if you have to use a supplement to like heal a man-made issue, or perhaps it's just a period of life where you're more stressed than you usually would be, then I think that whatever helps support your sleep and actually get good quality sleep is going to be beneficial, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like yeah, it's like sort of this the chicken and egg problem. Yeah, there was a friend of mine, actually Jim, I had in the podcast recently, Leo, and yeah, we're in like some mutual group chats, and people were talking. One of the challenges is like sleep, and he said very bluntly, he's like, the solution to sleeping well is just stop caring about it. And he actually, there was a book that was recommended. I can't remember the book, but it was a good recommendation. It was similar in line with Doctor like Joe Dispenza's book on back pain. I'll have to look the book up, but someone in the group recommended it and said, "Hey, basically the point was like I stressed about my sleep for like decades, and it became some people obviously are more prone to anxiety than others, and there's like a high anxiety individual, and they stress around sleep and trying to optimize it and how many hours did they get? Did they get enough deep sleep? And they had all these devices. It just made the problem worse and worse over years. And they read this book, which essentially gave them permission to like, you can stop caring about this entirely. And they stopped. And then they finally, finally their sleep cycle actually began to regulate itself since they were no longer giving it that kind of mental attention that the other nervous system actually, to as you say, it finally relaxed. So sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And maybe it's supplements, maybe it's just ignoring the problem for a while until it's no longer a problem.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like life works like that. Like the more you want something, the more it runs away from you. And the moment you stop caring, it's like, here you go. Now you can have it.
Yeah,
So it feels
and I had a ballet teacher years ago that said that, like when it came to improving your technique, that it was like a clown chasing he was a Latin American. This kind of sounded probably better in Spanish, but it was like a clown chasing a balloon. So if you imagine like a clown with like really big clown shoes, like this really big ball, and every time you try and get close to it, you kick it away, and then you can fall into that trap, and it upsets you. He's like, you don't want to be the clown. He's like, you have to just be, and then when you be, that's when you dance the best. Like that's when you become the artist. So just to use that analogy. So with melatonin, you mentioned something about for women, obviously, your overall like fertility health, hormonal health. How does that factor into the overall like female cycle?
Mhm. Sorry, I just don't think I understand the question. Like melatonin helping the female cycle?
It's like the importance of like sleep for women and how that regulates their overall like circadian rhythm and like their the infradian rhythm over the course of the month.
Yeah, of course. I think, well, firstly, I think that all the things that you do support your sleep. I think that sleep is like it's the cake that you've baked, and there's a lot of ingredients that go into that. So I think instead of just focusing on like, oh, I need like this right cake, it's like, well, are you putting the right ingredients in? And so, like, obviously, melatonin, some evidence to suggest that like we actually make melatonin in the morning sunlight.
Hmm.
So are you getting that ingredient? What's your nervous system doing? All these things. To obviously optimize melatonin is really important. I guess the biggest thing, and I guess the funnest, the most interesting thing we can talk about is probably estrogen. Estradiol is actually
Yeah.
very closely related to melatonin and the day length. And you can see this in animal studies and also studies on human cohorts where estradiol will actually change, and the way that it's metabolized will change based on day length.
Hmm.
And it's actually the biggest differentiation is in cold climates with shorter day length versus warmer climates with longer day length. And we see like that there's this really important cycle of estradiol, and it's closely tied to the seasons and the length of day. Now, you will have higher estradiol the longer your day length is. And so my day length might finish at 5 p.m., but if I'm on my blue light screens all night till 10 p.m., then my day length actually, even though I like logically know that it's not day anymore, my body actually still thinks that it's day. So it registers that as day length. And my estradiol will be higher. And estradiol is actually the most bioactive form of estrogen, has the most impact on our fertility, I would say. And we don't want it to be too high because if it's too high, your brain senses that through its receptors in the hypothalamus, and then it actually makes the decision to stop secreting all of the hormones or promoting the hormonal cascade of like FSH and LH that you need to actually ovulate. And ovulation is really important because you want the egg to leave the follicle to go down and for the sperm to interact with that oocyte and actually make a baby. But if your estrogen's too high, your body just senses that as a signal that it's not ovulation time, and it will not promote those hormones needed for you to actually ovulate, which will lead to something called anovulation. This is also really closely tied to disorders such as, well, obviously estrogen dominance, because we don't want estrogen to be too high, but also PCOS and insulin resistance. You'll see that a lot of these women, they all suffer with anovulation and are ovulating. And a big reason behind this is that spike in estrogen is just too high. Now, one of the ways you can deplete that is to metabolize it efficiently, which means that you need to actually have a shorter day length. So actually blocking the artificial light at nighttime. No, you're probably sick of hearing me say like block the artificial light at nighttime, but it's so important. I actually get most of my clients, I'm actually changing the way that I work right now, but usually I get them to run a foundational protocol for 2 months, which is just like, you don't actually need me. I just want you to do this protocol, put all these like natural lifestyle changes in place for 2 months, then come back. I'm not even going to run any labs yet. And then we'll run your labs because now we have a baseline of what actually is happening physiologically for you and what was just a result of your environment or your poor light hygiene. In Australia, a lot of my clients have to purchase their own labs, and so I don't want them wasting money. I would rather them just implement those light protocols, get grounded, eat, a low carb diet, and see where things go before we test. Most of the time, most of the issues will resolve. And if you do have a hormone panel, you'll see that estrogens dramatically decrease as well, which is fantastic. It shows we're on the right track. But so, yeah, I'm not saying light's the only cause. There definitely is other issues like gut dysbiosis and other things that can happen. And sometimes like you do need to access medical care as well through Western medicine to support like holistic healing. But it definitely is a key player in that. I think it's like, I actually read a paper yesterday. It was like up to a 20% differentiation. Like estradiol will fluctuate seasonally up to 20% based on light and day length, which is quite a bit when you think about it. So yeah, I mean, there's also other things that you can do to support those pathways, but I think, we need to be asking more questions and putting more resources into studying infertility in women. It's a much bigger issue than what we know. And statistically speaking, like it looks like a big issue on paper, but from actually being on the front line here, I specialize in fertility. Like every second girl that I talk to is fertility based and she can't get pregnant. And then, you look at the centralized treatments. I mean, there's a medication to treat anovulation that women will commonly get prescribed that is actually becoming increasingly more ineffective, which is used to treat exactly what we were just talking about, that high estrogen issue. And it works by blocking the receptor for estrogen in the brain. And so your body thinks, oh, estrogen's actually lower than it is. Now I can promote ovulation. Sometimes it works. More often than not now, it's becoming ineffective. And so if taking a medication that blocks estrogen reception is fixing anovulation, then why can't we do that naturally? Like, why can't we use herbal-based supplements, calcium D-glucarate? Why can't we improve insulin sensitivity, weight train, get morning sunlight, look after our day length, and get the exact same result without taking these medications and actually address the root cause? And I think that's where we're seeing like a lot of women starting to understand now. It kind of took our health and our fertility to realize this, but medications are not really treating the root cause. They're just kind of putting a band-aid approach. And then more often than not, later down the line, high estrogen is really closely linked to breast cancer. And so we can just mask our fertility issues with a medication, but the estrogen's still there. Whereas if we had just dealt with that in the first place, then we've actually put out the fire and we're actually setting ourselves up for success, not just for fertility, but also long-term as we age and get into those older years of life as well.
That was fascinating. So I'm a trying to
By the way.
No, you're making incredible sense. I'm just going to try and recap that for my own understanding. So I'm going to simplify. So the length of the day obviously length of the day affects estrogen production, and if you're artificially extending your day, making it longer and longer and longer, you're causing more estrogen to be produced, and you can sort of create an estrogen dominant situation, which can lead to PCOS, different conditions. Uh,
And estrogen is also actually regulating cycle length too.
mm.
So if someone has like a very long cycle, like 32 to 40 days, it's usually, I know that they're going to have high estrogen as well.
Okay, okay. There's that factor, and then you said your protocol, which is about 2 months, is so like rather than have someone get blood work when they're essentially dysfunctional, like since you know it's going to come back that well these numbers don't look good, get yourself do this protocol first to essentially using like photomodulation, light cycle, circadian cycle, to remedy a lot of those problems which you've created because you're again dysregulated. And then at that point, we'll see sort of what your actual biological baseline is, because otherwise, we're just going to see dysfunction.
Yeah. Especially if there's somebody who is not doing anything right and perhaps that they're very new to health, and perhaps I'm their first point of contact in like an alternative health space. I know that doing these things, having a lower carbohydrate diet, eating seasonally, getting outside, locking in a light environment, it's all going to help them. Weight training improves insulin sensitivity. They're going to see such dramatic effects. And now we can actually say, okay, so if you still have GI issues remaining, like, do we need to do a GI map? Do you have like bacterial overgrowth? Like, how's your gut permeability? What else is going on here? How's it, we can go in and test different areas that still need support. But I just think, and I mean, this way of practice is very nuanced, and it's something that I've chosen to implement because I was that girl, like, who left nursing school and who was so unwell in nursing school, a student, spending all of my money on different practitioners and different lab tests and all of these things, only to just be like spinning my wheels and not really getting anywhere. And so, yeah, just try and like set my clients up for success. And a lost client is a good client for me. So if their symptoms go away, that's fantastic. And if not, then we can do some work to find out what's actually going on.
Mm, well said. So talking about well, I have a few things. Yeah, PCOS. My wife was diagnosed with that years ago, which was not a correct diagnosis. In her case, she had hypothalamic amenorrhea. She didn't have any of the symptoms of PCOS. I realize maybe I'm wrong about this, but my experience has been over the years that PCOS is something of almost like what I call like a shoulder shrug diagnosis, where women will have like a whole big long list of issues. Yeah, and maybe it is like you have really high estrogen or elevated androgens and you're insulin resistant. Okay, you have PCOS. But then, it seems often any woman who's having any sort of ovulation, fertility issues, like, well, PCOS, which I don't know whether that's accurate or not. But like, how do you view it?
I think, yeah, it's just a label. It's just like a box. And if we can put women into the box, we have a treatment plan for that box, for the women that go in that box. So it's really easy for us to treat it. But if they don't have a box to go into, then it's like, well, I don't really know what to do because that's not my skill set as a doctor. My skill set as a doctor is to label you and then to give you the treatment plan that's attached with that label, right? Or send you to the specialist to put you into that box to give you that treatment plan. But really, it's far more complicated than that. There actually is like four, I think there's almost five now, different types of PCOS.
Hmm.
So there's a scale, and then you have to score a certain percentage on the scale. It's usually 2 out of 3 of these symptoms to actually receive a diagnosis. You don't actually have to have polycystic ovaries, so on an ultrasound, to actually have PCOS. You can have high androgens. My issue was I didn't have high testosterone. I didn't have polycystic ovaries. I just had high DHEAs.
Oh.
But I was labeled with PCOS, and I can see that more and more. Um, Even women with like low low progesterone and high estrogen and DHEAs are being labeled with PCOS. So it really varies from doctor to doctor, and the experience that doctor has had with women's health and PCOS as well. So diagnosis will change from one practitioner to the next. But a diagnosis is just a diagnosis. And then you have to ask, okay, well, how do we reverse these symptoms and what actually could be causing these things to fluctuate as they are or be abnormal? I think it's fantastic that doctors are starting to treat and diagnose these things. But a big issue that I'm seeing is doctors, and this happened to myself actually just a couple of weeks ago, which is funny. They're now, like in Australia, it was really bad. Like we couldn't get our hormones tested. We would have to pay like $200 or $300 to get them privately tested, which sucks. And the doctor would refuse to test them because hormones don't actually impact health, apparently. But now they have said that hormones do impact our health, and
Oh,
we
good.
we can get them tested at our GP, which is great, big win. But they don't actually know how to test them, and they actually don't know that hormones fluctuate during the month. And the timing of, the 21-day progesterone and things like this really depends on the individual. And so I'm having like all these women send me their lab work and they're like so upset. They're like, oh, I have low progesterone. My estrogen progesterone ratio is so out of whack. But yet their doctors tested their progesterone on like day 7 of their cycle or something like this. So it's like a big issue. It's really sad because as a girl, when you're looking after your health and then you get a lab test back and it's bad, you can feel so stressed, so depleted. Can I get pregnant? Is this going to impact my fertility? And really, it could be just simple a medical error, like a pathology error. And even just the 21-day progesterone, I'm guilty of this. When I first started, probably I was like 6 months into my business. I was like, oh yeah, some women, if they have a longer cycle or a shorter cycle, like 21-day progesterone rule is completely void. Like if you have a longer cycle, it's going to be like 23, 24 days where your progesterone will peak. If it's shorter, you might be looking at day 17, day 18 to actually get an accurate reading. And obviously the reading is going to impact the diagnosis you receive. So I see like a lot of poor diagnoses coming from incorrect hormone panel and timing on pathology. But yeah, I guess PCOS is a spectrum, just like, autism spectrum and all these things. And you fall somewhere on the spectrum in severity, and that'll dictate your treatment plan. But really, more often than not, I think that PCOS is just a metabolic condition. I think almost every single person that I've worked with that has PCOS also is insulin resistant. And thankfully, actually, I never thought I'd say this, but it's a very easy diagnosis to manage PCOS. There's so much great research out there. If you just research like insulin resistance treatment in PCOS women, look at the results page, it's really fantastic. And of course, things like different herbal teas and weight training is fantastic for managing PCOS because it's going to reduce like glucose in the system, lower the HbA1c. It's really treatable. And so if you're listening to this and you're like thinking that PCOS isn't treatable, it really is, and it's not that difficult. Obviously, some people it will take longer than others. But if you have like a strong mindset and you're willing to put in the work, because it is like diet and lifestyle changes and mindset, it is treatable. And so that's why it's so important that we speak out about this topic and podcasts like this keep coming out to get the information to the women that actually need it. Because unfortunately, like Western medicine is just falling so short, and it's just ending up with a pharmaceutical cascade of like metformin and all of these things, which is, yeah, it can work, but it's ending in like a whole cascade of other symptoms, I guess. So cost benefit ratio there is probably off.
Yeah, metformin. I'm not anti-metformin. I'm not a strong proponent of it the way some people in the biohacker space are. But yeah, metformin also it's not treating like the root causes, of the overall disease. Obviously, it'll help lower your blood sugar. It will do that, but obviously there's all the other factors at play that you have to look into. It's not a cure-all in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, I also have realized a lot too. Women that get diagnosed with PCOS, they have that mistaken belief, as many people do, that they have a disease that they're stuck with. I have this, and now this is part of who I am. And in reality, it's just, as you said, it's a metabolic condition. You can reverse your way out of it and be healthier for it. What about endometriosis? And so I know that's increased dramatically, the past so many decades. A lot more women experience it. It tends to be delayed diagnosis. And not that I expect you to have give me the answers to why it occurs, but what's your nobody has an answer, right? If anyone solves endometriosis today, tomorrow, this week, they're going to be a billionaire. That'll be a medical breakthrough. And medical science really doesn't know why it's happening. It's happening. But what's your perspective on it?
Good question. This topic is very close to home because one of my best friends has endometriosis.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked with her. She's actually one of my best friends now, but she actually was a client first. She owns a big cattle farm here in Australia, down in New South Wales. Beautiful woman, such a lovely girl. She just deserves the world. She's so fantastic. Beautiful mother. She already has a little baby. She's not a baby anymore. She's 4 years old. But so she has an endometriosis diagnosis, which she received after her birth of her first daughter. Mind you, there was a bunch of other medical history there as well. So diagnosis for endo, if you're going to be actually sure, about it is obviously you can do like a physical exam, and you can have your lab work done, and it's like a pain scale and all these things, but you actually have to have I can't say this word, laparoscopy done,
Mm-hmm.
which is where they actually put dye through your fallopian tubes and see if they're opened or closed. And if they're closed and the dye doesn't actually make it through, then they say that you have endometriosis, and they can look for lesions through your system. You don't have to have only lesions of endo in your like uterus or in your reproductive system, but you can also have it in like your rectum as well and in your intestines.
Mm-hmm.
So it can happen all through the body and almost every organ now, which is very like concerning. As to exactly why it's happening, I have absolutely no idea. Um, I think of endo very similarly to I think of when I was in anatomy class and we were looking at all these different tumors.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of these tumors um, was full of all these different cells from all through the body. And so it started growing like teeth and hair and like all these random body parts inside this tumor. And so when you take it out and you break it open, it's just like all these random, literally like teeth growing in there. And I kind of think of endo as something very similar, as in it's the cell, obviously, the lining of the uterus is actually being grown in places where it actually shouldn't, right? It's incoherent. It doesn't know where it's meant to go. And so it starts growing in different places. I can proudly say that Maddie had a second laparoscopy done, and there was no signs of endo and no signs of pelvic inflammatory disease, and her tubes
Mm-hmm.
flat with no medications. Um, and she was very proactive, grounding all the time, went on a low carb diet. What else was she doing? Yeah, completely managed her light environment and stress following the diet that I gave her. Um, and yeah, she went in, and I remember getting the text message from her. She was like, holy, I won't say the next word.
Yeah.
And then with her results, and she was so happy. She was crying. I'm at the doctor's, and like that's pretty unheard of, like to be
Hmm.
honest. I was very proud of that. Unfortunately, now she's gone on to have some other complications with some different things.
Mm-hmm.
She has a family history of, and this is very common with endo as well,
Mm-hmm.
is ectopic pregnancies,
Mm.
where the the egg gets lodged in the fallopian tube and actually starts to develop there. And so it can be quite painful, and it leads to a lot of
Yes.
miscarriages. And more often than not, like they actually have to have a procedure to have the embryo actually physically removed from the body. Which is not only extremely physically stressful, but it's very mentally stressful for women as well. But with all that being said, I know firsthand through not just this client, but several that treating body redox, so making sure that your body has like a high electrical charge via grounding, via doing lots of things to combat inflammation, just as you would with PID, is very, very useful. Like the treatment plan for PID and endo is very similar. I think that promoting cell turnover via like a ketogenic diet, obviously, if you're trying to get pregnant, actively, ketogenic diet might not be the best thing for you. But if you are just preparing and you're just using this as a tool before you do get into that phase of actually trying to conceive again, ketogenic diet is fantastic because we're going to start turning over bad cells, and we're going to start repairing and restoring our body and rebuilding proteins. And I think that happens systemically, so that's only going to be a good thing. I also think that estrogen has a massive um, part to do with it. Now, not every girl with endo is going to have a poor progesterone estrogen ratio. This client that I'm referring to did not. Other
Mm-hmm.
people, I do know, I have this sneaky suspicion, and this is just like something I was talking about with some of my practitioner friends the other day. When this study came out that was showing that more and more women were having endometriosis within their small and large intestines, thought, what on earth? Like, this is so crazy. And we were looking at what endo actually promotes the growth of in the body. And we thought it would be really interesting to know how many women with endo also suffer from chronic constipation and
Mm.
poor estrogen metabolism, because estrogen's excreted by the stool.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have constipation that's being reabsorbed. I don't actually know if it can be like what that pathway is in the intestines. But I was like, perhaps that rise in estrogen in that area of the body is somehow telling the body that that is meant to be the growth that's happening there. And I don't actually know how factual that is. I haven't gone and looked into it myself, but it's something that I'm exploring at the moment. Hopefully that wasn't too boring.
No, no, that was really interesting. I asked this like my sister. She has like very severe endometriosis that she suffered with for a long time, that she's had multiple surgeries for to like clear out the tissue growth, right? And there's nothing, like modern medicine doesn't have any real answers for it. Like it just is, it's
Let's
generic.
take
Say again?
it. It's like, let's just take it out. Let's just do surgery.
Yeah, like and the surgery helps, but then like it can grow back, right? And like that, that's the real issue. It's not like, okay, we can cut out, we can cut anything out of your body, but like why did it happen in the first place?
Mhm.
Um, and then I know, circadian rhythm I know has been linked to endometriosis.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you talked about, like, women that are exposed to, I think, along with like breast cancer, like night shift work also can predispose
Mhm.
you to it, irregular sleep patterns.
Yeah.
And then, I remember seeing something as well that, like plasmalogen metabolism, like, so plasmalogen is sort of like, like fatty acids. I'm oversimplifying, but like fatty acid metabolism that goes into like cellular structures and cell membranes, and also like there's immune system component to it. Like women who have endometriosis, they tend to have like sort of imbalanced plasmalogens, but then plasmalogens themselves are also like very regulated by
Mhm.
circadian rhythm. Yeah, and that's not to say that I think that, not to say that just going outside in the sun will fix it, but it's like a very weird breakdown in the body of your body's growing tissue where you don't want it to, and it can potentially spread. And why is that happening exactly? It's multiple things at play. That point about the stomach's interesting. Yeah, I remember years ago when leaky gut syndrome was considered a myth, essentially. Leaky gut
Mhm.
doesn't exist. It's bullshit. Like if you were 20 years ago, like that was the perspective on leaky gut. And then now today we know that your stomach like junctions, the structure of the, again, I'm simplifying, the structure of the stomach when you eat food and it goes through like small intestine, large intestine, the cells that make up that barrier can actually be loose. Like, this is on a molecular level, but they can be loose and things can leak through. And maybe there's like essentially some leakage of estrogen that's, sort of dispersing out. So that's not like a bad hypothesis at all. That's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, I wasn't really yeah, that's a great like, with the gut permeability issues and, like, leaky gut, I wasn't really thinking about it more so then, I was just thinking, like, with women who have, like, stool that's really heavy in estrogen.
Mhm.
Maybe they have, like, issues with, like, the DHEA enzymes and stuff like this, and they're constipated, then maybe, like, there's a reuptake of estrogen in certain areas of the body, like
Yeah.
the intestine, and that's actually influencing endometrial growth. I don't know, don't quote me on it, but it's just
Yeah.
something that I'm, like, into. I think it's interesting. But, yeah, I mean, the circadian rhythm controls everything from, like, cell turnover, like, our body has this mechanism where it's like, "Oh, you're not meant to be here, cell, or you're damaged, cell, let's get rid of you," and that's like our body's always being damaged, like, historically speaking, our body is very, resilient, but what stops this process from breaking down is, like, a poor circadian rhythm, um, and so it doesn't surprise me that when you implement, like, these practices that women's endo pain, like, does really decrease from, like, sometimes a 9, 10, 11 to, like, a 2 to 3, which is fantastic. Um, Endo is something where a lot of people will say, like, "You don't need to go to the doctors for endo, like, just treat it naturally." I'm like, "Okay, well, show me your results and show me your protocols then, because I wanna know what's going on here." Um, but for me, like, the approach is, like, sometimes surgery is needed to, like,
Mhm.
actually remove those lesions. I think it's very fantastic. Surgery is very non-invasive, because, like, repairing the lesions themselves, I think, is extremely difficult to do. And it can return very quickly, like, it's something that can come and go, like, very, very quickly, as my client, like, that I just spoke about saw. I think she went traveling to Europe and then came back and, like, all her symptoms returned.
Mm.
So, I mean, there's something to say there. Obviously, like, lots of radiation, incoherence again with time zones, poor circadian rhythm, inflammation's up. So, yeah. I think when you have these conditions, it's very, um especially PCOS, it's something that you don't just heal, and I've seen people try to heal it, and they do heal it, and they're, like, asymptomatic now, but then they think, "Oh, I'm healed," and then a few months later, like, "Oh, well, my symptoms are back again," because it's something that needs to be managed, like, probably for the rest of your life. Not in the sense that you have to take these medications or you have to follow this very strict protocol, but maybe, like, you're never going to be able to eat, like, refined high carbohydrates again without actually having, like, a flare. or something like this, and it does take a long time to like build that resilience back up and get that insulin sensitivity back. But unfortunately, like the treatment that I've seen is a combination of like Western medicine and also like alternative used together for like the best results.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a good point. Establishing, like, if you have a chronic disease, or if you have a disease that's sort of like metabolic, like multi-factor, it can take a long time to establish a new baseline. Like there's we'd like to think that once we've cured ourselves of something, like then we're like super resilient, robust, and we can sort of like we can handle the bad thing. Uh, but that's not necessarily the case. Like you see this like in obesity medicine, for example, like a simple example, someone that's 350, 400 pounds, they're 200 kilos, like they're like grossly obese. Okay, they lose all the body weight. But that problem wasn't just the body weight. It was psychosomatic. It was it was intensely psychological. It was environmental. It was their family. Like it's all these factors. Their brain, if they're obese a long time, it's sort of wired to want to eat food, right? Even if you use things like GLP-1s, like there's still the echo of all like the neurological wiring you lay down. So you could lose all the weight, which fantastic, but that doesn't mean you're ever going to be able to eat those things, right? Like you're going to have to maintain very tight control over your inputs, probably for the rest of your life. Yeah. So too it is with many things.
Yeah, and they see that like in the morphogenic field too. Like I can't remember who wrote this book, but on phantom pain, how people can like have their limbs removed, but they still feel like, for example, if I had my arm removed, I might still get pain in my fingers, but I don't have fingers anymore. So like, how is that possible? And you can feel like you're moving them, but you're not, because there's such this big connection with our brain and our body that often gets overlooked. And I mean, I was listening to my friend Cameron on his podcast, excellent podcast, Wiki Flow Nutrition, talk about this with a researcher, and the morphogenic field, there seems to be like this blueprint of us, of our body that maintain that like somehow we can't see it again, but it's there, and it's like this electrical morphogenic like blueprint of us. And the longer that we are away, or we are a certain way, it's like the longer that we are obese. And again, this is just my thought again, the more our structure, our electrical, our morphogenic field solidifies. And so our body seems to have like this predisposition to go back to that way. And it does take a long time for this to like coherence to resettle. Um, and so I think that's like a big component of it as well, to be honest. And then yeah, like the mindset work like behind it. Yeah, there's just health is just so fascinating. I just think that there's always something to study. There's always something to learn.
No, that's a really, I had not thought of that. That's a really good point with the morphogenic field, since like pain science is something I've always been really fascinated by. Um,
Mm.
since So I mean, I'll to give context to again the listeners, right? It's not just you and I talking, but like pain is like the common view of pain is like let's say like you prick your finger and like ow, like I hurt my finger, and like yeah, you did damage the tissue there. But what you interpret as pain is a signal sent by that part of the limb to the brain that then sort of elects like, okay, I'm going to react in a certain manner to this, and that becomes pain, right? Um, so like it can be entirely psychological. Like there's various psychological tricks you can do with people where I've seen this do. You can find YouTube videos of this where people will they'll put their arm like on a table, they have mirrors arranged, and their arm will be fine, but they'll be watching on the mirror like another hand being cut, and they just completely flip out. And they'll interpret like for a split second like, oh, it hurts, and like, oh wait, I'm fine, right? But again, like it's a psychological illusion. But the morphogenic field, there's this. I mean, don't quote me on this. I'm not an Ayurvedic, or Chinese medicine practitioner. But there's an idea in both of those disciplines that you have like a physical body, you have a spiritual body, you have an energetic body that exists, and all these things sort of layer together. And you can't fully separate them out, but like they're the things like you said before, because we can't see something, we assume it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
You can't see it, but it's part of your reality. And you are experiencing it, and it's experiencing everything around you. And in that case, like losing body weight, it's not just the weight materially. It's sort of like the metaphysical weight, and it's a metaphysical form that you previously had that you're also trying to literally shed and get rid of and slim that morphogenic structure down.
Mhm. Yeah. And we can see this, like, I think it's any child under 2 years old, if they accidentally chop the top of their finger off, it can regrow back perfectly the way that it was. Um, and that's where, like, the redox situation comes in too. Like, if we're talking about morphogenic field and, like, electricity, it's like the more electricity you have inside of you, like, the higher the negative charge, the more chance you have at actually, like, increasing that capacity in yourself. Um, so I think that, like, the absence of, like, the electricity is also going to, like, weaken, like, your morphogenic field and, like,
Mm.
weaken, like, body voltage in a way. There was also someone talking about the other day, how before something grows, there is, like, the electrical, like, field or outline that actually comes beforehand, and then the protein and the structure just fills it in. And then you have to ask the question, "Okay, that's great. Where the hell does that electric field blueprint come from?" Like, and we just don't know.
Mhm.
And so I'm still asking why to that question. I don't know the answer. Um, but yeah, so we're like trying to shed not only our physical body, but also like these other components too, and then also relay all this information to our brain. But I mean, our ancestors 200 years ago didn't think of anything about this, and they were perfectly like fine. So I don't know.
Well, it's almost like a platonic like theory of forms. Like there's a good book on like the body electric, where it talks. Yeah, you've probably read it. Yeah, it talks about essentially like that we are bioelectric beings. Like when as we lose our sort of electricity over time, like we age. But then like here's this interesting question of like how does our body even know how to structure itself? Because it's not just the DNA, right? Like even now, it's like, well, it's DNA. It's like that's not even an answer. It's like that has instructions in it that specifically says like we're trying to attach verbiage to something that's happening, natural phenomenon. But like like that sort of, I guess you could say Neoplatonism, where like somehow like in the world and the universe, like there's the sort of basket of forms that exist, and like life knows how to structure itself in very specific and extremely non-random, no possibility of being random ways. And then you get like the miracle of life, whether it's a limb, whether it's a child, whether it's anything. Um, and if you are a person that believes in God, you can call that, in some capacity, you can call that God. There's an intelligence to the universe. There's order to it.
Yeah, yeah. I just thought about that meme where it's like the husband and the wife sleeping. And she's like, "Oh, I bet he's thinking about other girls." And then it's like he's actually thinking like, "How does the body know how to structure itself?"
Yeah, that is what. Oh, maybe that is what's keeping him awake at night. I think about that a lot, especially since, I have kids now, and it is like very fascinating to watch them grow. And they do change literally like day to day, and also like when they hurt themselves, like they heal like amazingly fast. Obviously faster than even you do as a teenager. Like they can cut themselves or scrape a finger or whatever, and that's like 2 or 3 days, it's just back to normal.
Mhm. And we know this because, like, one of the machines that's used in, like, stroke recovery is called a stim machine, and it's literally, like, using electricity, and you place it on the arm to stimulate, like, repair, I guess, and they say it's by using the muscles, but I think it's actually more electrical than anything. And it works really well. And so we can see like these little when we actually have our eyes open, we can see we're already utilizing this science in medicine and we have been for a long time. In TCM, we've been using it for ages. So imagine if like we could use like electricity and like redox tools on patients in hospitals, like have grounded beds, have, like stim machines, have all these things, like how quickly we could have people heal. The Japanese even just created a bandage, which actually donates like electricity to the wounded area and it increases healing by 4 times.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm really excited to see like what comes from this field.
That's very exciting. How do you, on that note, I meant to ask you this probably an hour ago, but like, how do you view red light therapy? It's like the portable, red light panels, things like that. Are
Yeah,
they
I have
useful or? Okay.
I just see it as a tool as to like where we should be having like infrared light around us all the time. So like when I don't, I might have like a red light panel on. Like I really love it when I shower. If I have a bath, I put like the red light on the water like before I get in, and I find it so calming. Like I just feel it's very calming. Um, Obviously it's great for mitochondrial health. Actually in one of the lectures in QHA, we have this video and we didn't do the video. We didn't take it, obviously. It's from a researcher, but it shows 2 groups of cells, and one it has infrared light shone on it, and one blue light, and you can see that all the mitochondria under the blue light just die off, whereas all of the cells that are exposed to the infrared light actually are thriving. So the note and the key takeaway from that is that you don't really want to be around blue light without infrared. So if I do find myself indoors, like working on podcasts for a long period of time, like in front of me, I have like an infrared light on. In my bathroom, I have it on. Obviously, I want to be outside as much as I possibly can. Um, I don't really want to be selling my clients $500-600 red light panels. I don't feel good about doing that unless I really have to, and they're like in finance in New York, or they just don't want to get outside. Maybe they're someone who just wants the thing to help.
Mm.
Um, I don't think there is any replacement for sunlight when you understand how intricate the system is and just how much we don't know, even to the angle of light and how it hits our eyes and bounces. It's just pinpoint precise, that I think it could have some negative connotations, like, moving forward as the studies come out, but at the moment, it seems to be only overwhelmingly positive. I also think there's a threshold, so, like, once you've kind of caught up on the infrared or something, or you've reached, like, this baseline, maybe you don't need it as much, but, like, I think it can be, like, really useful, especially, like, post-operative, because it's gonna increase that exclusion zone water, which will really help, post-op outcomes, so, yeah.
I know that's helpful. So see, like I own red lights, and then obviously they become very popular. Some companies are making like super powerful red lights, which I'm very positive you can overdo red light exposure beyond radiance. And they get expensive. Like you can spend $1,000, $2,000 or more on red lights.
You can spend, like,
Uh,
$25,000 on red light tunnel.
Yeah, no, I mean I've seen there's some devices now. I saw I think it was like a $65,000 red light bed. It's like it looks like something out of science fiction, like something you poison Superman with. But it looked really cool, and like that one, that's an incredibly expensive device. Like that's more than a car. That's yeah. I'd be like, yeah, for that amount of money, and like I think you could probably like take a vacation somewhere and go change your light environment. That probably maybe that'd be healthier.
Yeah.
Or because the sun is also, well, depending on where you live, like the sun is free. So
Yeah, exactly. I don't wanna see, like, this return to nature, like, health situation turn into, like, "Here's 100 products that you need," type situation, and, like, a lot of I mean, I've been in the space for, like, long enough now that I mean, it kinda comes full circle back to what you originally said when it's like, stop caring about something and then you get better. So I see a lot of people who get into the space because they're sick, and they'll get the red light panels, and they'll get, like, this water filter system. I think water filters are great, by the way. Or they'll get, like, all the gadgets, and then they're in the space, and they're consuming the content all the time, and then they're always thinking about the next thing. But then when they actually stop caring about all that stuff and they walk away and they just live a normal life, then they actually start to thrive, and they actually start to really truly heal. Obviously, it's important to optimize all these areas of your life and, like, actually fix, like, the issue that you have. But then I'm kind of, like, advocating for people to, like, walk away and, like, get offline, get off social media. Like, when you understand the things that make you sick, it's like, no, you don't need to know any more information. Like, you've healed, like, go and live your life. I think that when you are so full in yourself and you're surrounded by love and community, and you have, like, a high electrical charge and your heart feels, like, really strong, like, we make electromagnetism in ourselves, like, that saves you against non-native EMFs, like, literally. It acts as like a shield, like, literally, it sounds crazy. Um, and that's, like, really what you should be working on to maintain good health. Yeah, you
no,
don't really need
I,
gadgets.
no, I agree. I agree. I'm in like the health optimization space, obviously, or holistic health, whatever you want to call it. I go to a lot of events, a lot of conferences, and there's always new things coming out. But then, like, you look at people, you look at, like, let's say our ancestors who did live a long time and who probably did a lot of bad things. Maybe they smoked, maybe they chain smoked for 8 decades. Maybe they
Mhm.
drank a lot. Like maybe they kept weird hours. Maybe they ate uninhibited, but they still lived a long time. But what they had, which people often lack today, is they had love, they had relationships, and they had a network of people they cared for, and
Mhm.
who cared for them. And you can't replace that with anything. Like money cannot buy that at all.
No, it can't, and, like, yeah, community is just so important. I really felt that over, like, the last few months, like, my community, like, really coming forward and supporting me, like, through various things. Like, people love to say how toxic the health space is, and, like, I agree that there's some crazy people in the space. Um, and perhaps sometimes it's more detrimental than good, but honestly, the connections that I've made in this space have been fantastic. But you know what? Those connections now aren't online. Like, they'll ring me and we'll talk to each other, and they're the people that, like, are really there for you and really love and care about you and will fill up your cup. and you feel theirs, and that'll increase your health. Um, I feel like so often we just like get trapped in this like another world, which is like this phone, right?
Mm.
And we just have this like almost like gluttony for knowledge and information. And it really is like information gluttony, and it's not a good thing to have. But yeah, I just don't really know where I was going with that. But community is so important. It gives you a why, it gives you a feeling of safety, of connection. And nothing can replace it. And as you said, like money can't buy it. And yeah, that comes from it's a testament to who you are as well as a person. You know what I mean? Like if you have a good community and good people in your life, it's usually because you represent those things as well.
No, it's a test of character.
Mhm.
So we've been talking about, I think, 2 hours. It's 11 p.m. here. I definitely want to get into darkness.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know what
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay.
I was
It's okay.
go.
It's all right. Where can people find you? How can women work with you? Just with the relevant social details.
Yeah, of course. I guess content for me is pretty slim. I try to put out like high yield information. So if I do, it's usually quite helpful. I have X, which is like Kiera Lee Wellness, like Kiera L Wellness, and then I have Instagram, which is Kiera Lee Wellness. And then I have a Substack and things like this. So I'm pretty much everywhere you can find me. Have a podcast called The Health Standard, which I like interview researchers and have very nerdy conversations with them. And then I run like a women's health community as well, which you can join. Lots of other people in there. We do weekly like Q&As, accountability sessions. There's Bible studies in there as well, which are just optional for people. And I post like blog posts in there and just generally like provide support for everyone who needs it and wants to work towards better health in a more closed circle space. I think it's really important. Like we can scroll for days and like connect with all of these different people. But I think it's really important to like pick a group of people and really nourish that community and access that information rather than just outsourcing to multiple people without implementation, you know?
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you for coming on. So this is a fantastic episode. Like I love this one.
I hope so. I feel like I've just bored you or just like,
No, you did not at all. Absolutely the opposite. No, this was really fascinating. No, people, believe me, everyone's going to get the listener, especially the women. Like everyone will get a lot out of this. Like I learned. I'm gonna go back and re-listen to this myself at various parts. So that was Kiera, everyone. If you want her back on, let me know. Send me a DM, and I will talk to you all again.